but it's there. It's getting ready
Sure.
to. Give it a moment. It's not quite
Seems to be,
live yet.
yeah.
Okay, you're live and you have quorum.
We're live and we have quorum and we are on time. So I think we'll launch right in because there are other people out there, I'm sure, would like to get their supper time done. So if we could go ahead then, good evening, everybody. I call this public hearing to order at, I have 5:31 p.m. on Tuesday, September 6, 2022. We are being held electronically as authorized by the Local Government Act, Section 465, 1.1. I acknowledge that we are gathered today on the traditional and unceded territory of the Squamish Nation. Now, the public hearing is being held tonight to consider the proposed rezoning amendments 1065-69, 2022 for 609 Glen Road, and 1065-67, 2022 at 504 South Fletcher. We will deal firstly with the Glen Road rezoning, and secondly with the South Fletcher. So if you are here for either one of those, please speak up when we are focused on that particular rezoning. The council members present with us this evening are Councillor Alaria Ladwig, Councillor Anne-Marie D'Andrade, and Councillor and Deputy Mayor David Kroll. Staff members present are Chief Administrative Officer Emmanuel Machado, Corporate Officer Rebecca Anderson, Director of Planning and Development Services Leslie Ann Statz, and Recording Secretary Lisa Evanson. I am Mayor Bill Beamish, and I will chair this evening's proceedings. All persons who believe their interests are affected by the proposed bylaws shall be given an opportunity to be heard on the matters contained in the proposed bylaws, or to submit their written submissions to the corporate officer before tonight's hearing is adjourned. Under the Local Government Act, as chair of a public hearing, I am entitled to make procedural rules for the conduct of the public hearing. For this public hearing, we will use the following protocols. Persons wishing to speak during the public hearing are invited to use the raise hand feature by clicking on the hand icon found at the bottom of your screen. Pressing *9 on a telephone, the meeting administrator will then add you to the speakers list, and you'll be able to unmute and turn on your video when it's time to speak. Please identify yourself clearly, stating your name and residential address before you begin to address council. Speakers are allowed up to 5 minutes to make their presentation and may not transfer all or part of their allotted time to another speaker. Members of council are present to hear your submissions and not to answer questions or debate the merits of the bylaws under consideration. Council members may ask for clarification of members of the public after the submissions, and I would ask them to do that through me as well. Persons wishing to speak a second time may do so only after all other persons wishing to speak have been provided the opportunity to speak for a first time. Persons speaking a second time will be limited to 3 minutes. A written submission may be submitted via email to clerk@gibsons.ca in lieu of speaking, provided it is received prior to the close of the public hearing. All written submissions will be circulated to council and will become part of the public record. So the first bylaw we're going to deal with tonight is the zoning amendment bylaw 1065-69 for 609 Glen Road. The Director of Planning and Development Services will now introduce the proposed zoning amendment at 609 Glen Road.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor Beamish. I am going to share my screen because I have a presentation. Okay. All right, do you see the presentation now?
Yeah, I still see your notes on the right-hand side.
Oh, okay. There we go. Is that better?
That's good, yeah.
Okay, thank you. So this presentation is an application at 609 Glen Road for a proposed zoning bylaw amendment to reduce the minimum lot size to 500 square meters to allow a lot split subdivision. The subject property is outlined in blue here, and it's located in the Heritage Hill neighborhood at the intersection of Glen Road and an unbuilt segment of Beach Avenue. It's also got additional lot lines at Hicks Lane and Gibson's Way. The property is currently developed with a single family dwelling, which you can see in the topo image. And it's surrounded by a single family residential neighborhood in the Heritage Hill area and on North Fletcher. As can be seen in this excerpt from the 1910 subdivision of Heritage Hill, the current size of the subject site is the result of the original lots 21 and 22 being consolidated into Lot B. And so what the applicants are hoping to do is subdivide it back into two separate lots. So the land use designation in the OCP for this property is low density residential 1, which is the same for the entire Heritage Hill neighborhood. This requires 20 units per hectare density anticipated by the designation, which is 1 dwelling per 500 square meters. So this requested rezoning is in accordance with the OCP, and no change to the OCP is required or necessary. The current zoning for the property is R3, so single family and 2 family residential zone 3, and it's shared with the neighborhood as shown in this map. So the property would keep that same R3 zoning. So the proposal is to subdivide the site into 2 lots for single family development. And each of the lots would be approximately 500 square meters. The R3 zone requires a minimum lot size of 555 square meters. And that's why this rezoning is brought forward, because they'd like to reduce that lot size from 555 square meters to 500 square meters. So the proposed zoning amendment does retain the lot's R3 zoning and seeks to introduce a site-specific condition to the zone to allow that reduced lot size as shown here. This is an excerpt of the zoning amendment. So it's site-specific to this property and requires a minimum lot area of 500 square meters. So referral comments were received from all referral agencies except for Vancouver Coastal Health. No concerns or objections to the rezoning were raised. As part of a zoning amendment, the community amenity contribution policy is triggered. And so as part of that, the applicants have provided an offer letter of $10,000, which is consistent with the community amenity contribution policy. And that's basically the contribution for 1 new single family lot. So in terms of where we are in the process, the bylaws received first and second readings on July 26th. And then we put advertisements in the Coast Reporter on August 26th and September 2nd, advertising for tonight's public hearing. And today the public hearing is being held. So after this public hearing, the bylaw will be on the agenda tonight for consideration of third reading. And then after third reading, we would send a referral to the Ministry of Transportation for approval. And once that gets approved, then it would be before council for consideration of adoption. So at any reading, council may move the bylaw forward, make changes, or reject it. And if the bylaw is adopted, then it comes into effect immediately. And that's it for this presentation. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Director. If you could clarify one thing for me. This lot previously existed as two separate lots, did it?
It did, yes. So
Okay.
this subdivision plan here shows, I'll just get a laser here. Can you see this? Okay, there we
Yes.
go.
Yeah.
So there used to be two lots at one point, and then these two lots were consolidated. So the application is to basically re-subdivide it.
Okay. Good. Thank you.
No problem. I'll
Okay.
stop sharing.
I will now ask the corporate officer to note and present any written submissions received to date regarding the proposed zoning amendments at 609 Glen Road.
Zoning amendment bylaw 1065-69, 2022, 609 Glen Road. There were 5 written submissions received from 6 individuals. 2 were in support of the proposed zoning amendment bylaw, 2 were opposed, and 1 was neutral. These submissions were included in the agenda published at 2:00 p.m. on September 6, 2022. There was 1 additional written submission received relating to the proposed zoning amendment bylaw after preparation of the agenda, which I will read out into the record. This was received from Arla Bevan of 622 Glen Road. To whom it may concern, I am the owner and resident of 622 Glen Road. I am not opposed to the rezoning of this lot, but I would like parking to be considered. We already have congestion issues as it is. It's next to impossible to turn around on Glen Road due to the number of vehicles parked on the street. Many homes have no off-street parking, and then you add a tenant to the many suites in the area, and it is a real headache. If this rezoning goes ahead, please consider that only 1 family be allowed in each residence and that the parking is addressed. That's the end of that submission. That was submitted today, September 6, 2022. As noted, individuals may choose to forward written submissions via email to clerk@gibsons.ca up to the close of this hearing, and those submissions will be collated at adjournment and circulated to council for consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, our corporate officer. We will now seek public input, starting with the proposed zoning amendment bylaw at 609 Glen Road. Is there anyone wishing to speak for or against this bylaw? Councillor Deandrade, sorry, you had a question? Go ahead.
Yes, Mayor, thank you. It's just a clarification because I have only 2 letters, but I heard 6. Is there more? Do I have the wrong? Oh, okay. So,
Yeah.
thank you.
Mayor Beamish, I am sending over Richard, someone named Richard, and I'm going to set the timer once he's in. Richard,
you.
to accept the promotion to panelist. There he is. Just one moment while the timer sets up.
Hi, Richard, please identify yourselves in this case and your address, please. And you're on mute still.
Richard, you're muted.
There you go. Now you can start all over again.
Sandy Kirkwood and Richard Martin, 615 Glen Road. The neighboring property to Lot B.
Yeah.
So generally not opposed. I think we echo the same sentiments as in the letter from Michael and Judy Bonkoff in terms of, the concerns raised, the traffic and the support, as long as the applicants are not looking to immediately apply for a variance to the site. The original concept of R5 zoning would definitely not have flown with us, but dividing it into, subdividing this as R3 properties, I think we would accept. It's fine. There are some, and as outlined in our letter, there are some concerns over the actual size of the existing lot because there were two sets of numbers provided. There was the smaller lot size and the larger lot size. And we did raise the question as to which is the correct lot size. And you've got the wrong lot size then.
I'm losing your sound, Richard.
We did have some questions about the lot size as noted in the letter, so don't need to speak any more about that. But I think the Gibson's municipality certainly wants to double check that before they do the lots. Any other comments from you, Sandy?
No, it was in our letter.
Yeah, pretty much everything as per the letter.
Thank you, Richard. And we have your letter on file that was received as part of our agenda package.
Yeah.
So thank you. Thank you very much. Corporate officer, is anybody else? Your corporate officer, you're on mute.
I am bringing over Judith Bonkoff.
Thank you.
Hello, hello.
Ms. Blancoff,
Good,
welcome.
good evening, Mayor and Council. I did send a submission and I hope you've read it. And just to reiterate my concerns, I am not opposed to the two lots, but I do have some concerns about zoning and setbacks and what happens after these are two lots. Very concerned because we have situations in our neighborhood that are less than acceptable. You know the ones I'm speaking of, and they really went over the top with setback, with allowing variances on setback. There's no appropriate parking on these lots other than their garage, and so the overflow is going to the roads, and it just isn't acceptable. If these lots are approved, then I think the bylaw says that each property has to have 2 parking spaces. If there is going to be a suite, which I think, this should be looked at as far as bylaws go, there should be 3 parking spaces that are off-road, all of them off-road. And in a case like this, where there's a lane up above and there is the road in front, we really could, insist that there are 3 spots. My other concerns, of course, are height variance and, and just overall setbacks. And I asked you, and I'm not sure this is possible, that we put, restrictions on these lots, that this is what has to happen. I'm afraid that they could reapply for duplexing after they get the division of the one lot. And I understand that the owner is going to live in the cottage and he's going to build on the other side. So what would stop him from reapplying later down the road for a duplex? And I just don't think we want to go there in this neighborhood. We are really tight here. We've got small lots, 50 by 100, most of them. And then all the cars that go along with it. So I'm imploring and pleading with you guys to see what you can do with, stopping any further variances on these properties. It's serious. We like to keep our neighborhood looking the way it is and not being putting up these big monster, cookie cutter houses that don't suit. So I think that's all I approve, but I really hope that you can do something to restrict what happens in the future on these lots. So that's all. Thank you so much for hearing my comments.
Thank you for your submission.
And Remish, I see no further hands raised. Oh, I see Councillor Andrade has her hand up.
Councilor Diandrat?
Thank you. Well, just a clarification. The current zone, sorry, the zone that, I know they asked for R5, but staff proposed R3 and we so far accepted. So R3 allows for one duplex per property.
No.
No? Oh.
Sorry, I'm just going to jump in here.
Yeah, please do.
The minimum, so this would keep the R3 zoning. And in order to have a duplex, they'd have to have a larger lot. So what would be allowed on this property is just a single family dwelling.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Ludwig?
Just to seek further clarification from the Director of Planning if possible. But right now, all housing types in Gibson's allows a secondary suite. So the single dwelling could still have a secondary suite. Would that be correct, Director of Planning?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
And could you clarify the question about parking? Would it be two parking for the main house, one for the secondary suite, if they were to do that?
So for parking, a single family dwelling requires 2 on-site parking spaces. So each lot would have to have 2 on-site parking spaces. And there are provisions for parking for secondary suites. I believe if they're within a certain distance from a bus stop, they don't need to have an on-site parking space. So for this property, it's pretty close. I think there's a bus stop pretty close to this property, so they wouldn't need secondary suite parking on site. So for the 2 lots, if they were to build a single family dwelling with a secondary suite on each lot, they would be required 2 on-site parking spaces.
For each. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to ask a second time. Is there anybody wishing to speak for or against the proposed zoning amendment bylaw at 609 Glen Road?
I see no hands raised, Mayor Beamish.
Okay. Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing for this property. And please note that once the public hearing is adjourned, council may not continue to receive further information or feedback from members of the public regarding the bylaw. Municipalities are legally required to ensure transparency, procedural fairness, and due process when considering public hearing regarding the bylaw. Legal requirements arise from common law established by court cases and include requiring that all public feedback received be publicized as part of the open session of the public hearing and be made available to everyone in attendance. This is to ensure transparency of everything that is considered. Members of council, when giving bylaw further readings for this region, council and staff accept public input up until the adjournment of the bylaw public hearing, and nothing is accepted afterwards. So I'll now go to the second public hearing. And this is for 504 South Fletcher. And I thank everybody who participated in the 609 Glen Road public hearing. We're now at 504 South Fletcher Road. And I will ask the corporate officer to note and present any written submissions received to date regarding the proposed zoning bylaw at 504 South Fletcher Road.
My apologies, Mayor Beamish, but through you, I believe that the Director of Planning first had a presentation about this bylaw.
Okay, yeah. Trying to read my script, which is essentially rolling 2 scripts into one this time. So, Director of Planning, if you would, if you have a presentation for this submission, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I do. I will just share my screen again here. And I'll start my slideshow. And are you seeing the presentation or my notes here?
I can see your notes as well.
Okay, there we go. Okay, so this application is for a zoning amendment to rezone the property from R2 to RM6 to allow future multifamily development in accordance with the OCP. So the subject property outlined here in blue is located between South Fletcher Road and Periwinkle Lane. The property is currently developed with a single family home and is surrounded by a low density residential neighborhood. The community uses of Holland Lands and the mixed commercial uses of Gower Point Road. The land use designation of the property in the OCP is medium density residential, as shown on this map, and it's shared with 7 other properties on the south side of South Fletcher Road between School Road and Holland Lands. So no change to the OCP designation or related guidelines is necessary to support the requested rezoning because the proposed change is consistent with the vision of the official community plan. The property's current single-family residential 2 zone is shared with the surrounding single-family developed properties here. One nearby property at 524 South Fletcher Road is currently zoned RM6, which is the zone that is proposed for the subject site. So the requested RM6 zone represents an appropriate rezoning of the site to meet the intentions of the OCP. The property is one of 8 on the southeast side of South Fletcher between School Road and Holland Lands that are specifically referenced in the intent of this zone. So what I've done here is put a little bubble image of the intent of the zone. And it says to permit townhouse and apartment use at low to medium densities, and specifically on smaller parcels on the southeast side of South Fletcher Road between School Road and the Holland Lands. So the maximum density on this site would allow 5 apartment units. So this zone here talks about what the existing zone is, so the R2 zone, and then the proposed zone is the RM6. So we'd go from single family in the existing. The proposed permitted uses would be apartment or townhouse use with a lock-off suite or secondary suite. The existing R2 allows 1 single family dwelling, whereas the proposed RM6 would allow up to 5 apartment units, and that's based on the lot size. The density is based on the lot size. The existing height for the R2 zone would be 8 meters, but in the RM6 zone, it would be measured as 6 meters from the sidewalk on South Fletcher Road because it is in a view protection area. And then the lot coverage would increase from what is now 45% and in the single family R2 to 75% in the multifamily RM6 zone. So referral comments were received from all agencies and no concerns or objections to the zoning amendment were raised. In terms of the community amenity contribution, it's been triggered as part of the rezoning for residential density, and what's been offered is $15,000 as in accordance with the policy. So as I stated in the last presentation, the first and second readings of the bylaw were passed on July 26th, and then the advertisements for this public hearing were published in the Coast Reporter on August 26th and September 2nd, and today is the public hearing. So following today's public hearing, this will be considered on tonight's council agenda for 3rd reading, and then a referral will go to the Ministry of Transportation for approval of the bylaw, and once the ministry approves it, then we would bring the bylaw back to council for the final reading, which would be for adoption. So at any reading, council may move the bylaw forward, make changes, or reject it. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director. Okay, I'll now ask the corporate officer note to present any written submissions received to date regarding the proposed zoning amendments at 504 South Fletcher.
Thank you, Mayor Beamish. Zoning Amendment Bylaw 1065-67, 2022, regarding 504 South Fletcher Road. There were 10 written submissions received from 13 individuals. One was in support of the proposed zoning amendment bylaw and 9 were opposed. These submissions were included in the agenda published at 2:00 p.m. on September 6, 2022. There are no additional written submissions received relating to the proposed zoning amendment bylaw after publication of that agenda. As noted again, individuals may choose to forward written submissions via email to clerk@gibsons.ca up to the close of this hearing, and those submissions will be collated at adjournment and circulated to council for consideration.
Thank you very much, corporate officer. We will now seek public input with the proposed zoning amendment bylaw at 504 South Fletcher Road. Is there anybody wishing to speak for or against this bylaw?
We have Kathleen Vance coming over as a panelist.
Yep. Kathleen Vance, welcome.
Yes. Whoop. Okay, are you meant to be able to see me? Oh, I know how to do that now.
Yeah.
Okay, there you
There you
go.
are. Thank you.
All right. I'm opposed. Oh, Kathleen Vance, 301 Headlands. I live in Lower Gibsons.
Thank you.
I'm opposed because this will not provide the affordable housing that Gibsons needs. I think in regard to this kind of densification, I think to call this NIMBY is totally wrong. That it's true. I live in a single family home. I have my own garden. And for me, densification means noise, parking, loss of privacy, a change in the whole feel of Gibsons. But I am like totally all right with that if it means the school doesn't have to worry about hiring teachers. My clinic can hire a doctor. I can get a roofer to redo my roof when my house needs one. If all those people can live and work in Gibsons, I'm happy to deal with densification. What I'm not happy with is that this doesn't create that. That what's happened is the argument is that there's some kind of supply and demand argument that somehow if we can increase the supply of housing, that will help solve this problem. But I'm saying no, because the problem is we don't have enough affordable housing. It doesn't matter if we increase the supply of housing that is not affordable. That doesn't do me any good. All I do is lose from that in terms of my own quality of life. The problem is that that notion of increasing supply, it seems to me, only works if you've got a controllable situation. But right now we're in a situation where anywhere on the planet, somebody can click some keys on their computer and say they want small town waterfront or waterfront view, and all these properties appear all over the planet. And they have the resources. And thanks to COVID, they've actually gotten billions and billions of dollars richer than they were 2 years ago. So I don't see how this supply and demand is working anymore. It doesn't work for somebody. The idea is that somehow people are going to move up into something else and they will leave behind their apartment, which someone else is going to be able to rent. But I don't see that happening. I don't see somebody moving up to take on $1 million mortgage. I think we need affordable housing. And I guess my fear is that what's going to happen to Gibson's is people like me are going to be crowded and crowded out, and we will still have very well-to-do people who will have large estates because they are quite capable of protecting their own large properties. But the rest of us are just in a lose-lose-lose situation. And I just, I would be so happy to have apartments that people who work in Gibson's can afford to live in. That's what I want. I do not want more of this kind of housing. And that's my fear. And I guess that's what I have to say.
Thank you, Ms. Vance.
I am now bringing over Greg and Janie Marshall. Greg and Janie, I'm going to ask you to unmute.
I'm unmuted at this point,
You are
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
and I'm starting video there.
Yeah,
Thank
there
you
you
very
go.
much. Greg and Jane Marshall, 503 South Fletcher. Just across the street from the property where the amendment is being proposed. Oh, my wife does not want to be in this. I'm trying to be inclusive, but I guess it's me. My concern here is parking, for one. South Fletcher is already quite crowded, as it also serves as a parking lot for the school district office. There are an awful lot of short-term rentals along this street where the street is their parking in reality, because the only other parking is on Persephone Lane. So I would like to see some concrete description of what kind of parking would be allowed for this kind of development. I have to share some of the concern of the previous speaker that I don't really want to see more short-term rental in this area. I know it's a good source of revenue for the people who operate it. I would much rather see ownership units or long-term rentals. I don't know how that could be arranged, but I don't think the plan that is proposed by the owners is very clear on that. All I see is 5 units with one of them owner occupied, and that leaves a lot of latitude for how things are actually executed. So while I generally agree that a person who owns a property should be allowed to do within limits what they wish with it, I really would like to see the town express some concern over how the units will be used and how they'll be supplied with parking. I think what the owners of this property intend to do for themselves is quite a reasonable thing. They wish to age in place in a place they already love. But I think the concerns of the community also have to be taken into account in terms of the interests for the rest of us. So I'll leave off at that, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm not outstandingly negative on this, but I really wish there was some way of applying conditions to the development that better met the needs of the town. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I'm now bringing over Justine Davidson.
Hi, good
Hi.
afternoon. My name is Justine. I live at 513 South Fletcher, which is right across the street from the proposed change property. And I'm speaking today on behalf of myself, my wife, and my mother-in-law. We all live together in our beautiful home on South Fletcher. We acknowledge that this is in accordance with the official community plan, but at this point, unfortunately, South Fletcher just hasn't been developed by the town in a way that can accommodate all these new homes that are being proposed for it. We only have parking on one side of South Fletcher, and I'm going to try not to repeat too much of what I said in my letter, which is lengthy. But that's a really important point that I think I echo my neighbor's point, Greg's point, who just spoke. We only have parking on one side of the street. We house the library, we house the ICBC building, we house the town hall where you folks are coming from virtually right now. We house a daycare center and an education center. And unfortunately, the town is not able to maintain our street in a way that allows for the amount of traffic that we have. The hedging and landscaping that comes onto the one sidewalk that exists is overwhelming right now. People have to walk on the street. We have a warming center on our street in the winter, which means there's folks who just are walking in the street a lot of the time. And we have the new development at 524 South Fletcher, which the planning department pointed out at the beginning in her presentation. That's a 4-unit building. All of the units are priced at over $1.4 million. 2 of them have not sold. The building is almost fully constructed. So we're going to have at least 2 empty homes on our street. And my concern is that we're going to allow 5 more homes to be built. They're all going to be $1 million plus homes. As Kathleen said, these are not homes that are affordable or accessible to members of our community that are needed right now. We have restaurants that can't open 7 days a week because they can't get people to work in their kitchens, and they can't get people to work behind the bar. And those people are not buying $1.4 million homes, and they're not even able to rent $1.4 million homes. So until the town of Gibsons can increase its bylaw enforcement to clear derelict cars off of South Fletcher, I think there's 2 right now. The whole neighborhood has brought it to the town's attention, and we've just been told that the town doesn't have the resources to tow derelict cars. I know that there's also a bunch of derelict cars down on our where the community and tourists walk down off Gower Point Road to get onto our beautiful shorefront. There's 3 cars down there right now that have had bylaw tickets on them for the whole summer. So if the town doesn't have the capacity to enforce its own bylaws, then the town doesn't have the capacity to increase housing in the most or second most dense area that we're all living in, which is Lower Gibsons. I understand that this is in accordance with the community plan, and to that extent, I'm not opposed, but I am opposed if there's not a plan associated to the proposal itself, and also a plan from the town of how the town is going to start enforcing its bylaws, keeping roads clear, and keeping high traffic areas like South Fletcher accessible to the entire community and not just to people who are super wealthy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you, Mayor Beamish. I'm now bringing over Jake Sweeney.
Jake,
hear me?
welcome. Yeah, you're here.
You good?
Yep.
Okay. The one thing,
Jake, your address, please, and
the one issue with this
your
situation.
your address, please, Mr. Swaney.
Oh, sorry. 549 Sergeant Road, right in the corner of School and Sergeant.
Thank you.
I quite regularly walk down South Fletcher with parking as already identified as on one side, no bike lanes. If a development goes on the other side of South Fletcher with no parking allowance, it's going to be a nightmare. The previous submission of the previous bylaw had identified parking. I don't think that's as big of an issue. I've looked at both sites. I don't think the first one is a big issue for parking, but this one certainly is. And unless that can be addressed in some equitable fashion, I think it'll just congest South Fletcher up too much. The people on South Fletcher now can only park on South Fletcher or in the alleyway behind their house. And that's about it.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mayor Beamish, I see no further hands raised.
Okay, I'm going to ask for a second time. Is there anybody wishing to speak for or against proposed zoning bylaw at 504 South Fletcher?
Well, now we have a couple of first-time speakers who have just put their hand up.
Okay.
I'm bringing over Pamela McElleran and Stephen Bailey.
Yep.
Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for your patience so far in hearing the concerns. My husband and I are the owners of the property at 504 South Fletcher. So I just wanted to make a few comments. I did want to say that I have thoughtfully reviewed all of the letters submission, and I really have thoughtfully thought about the concerns of my neighbors. My immediate neighbors, who are directly beside me and behind me, have not expressed any concerns, but I know about the concerns and share them for the parking on South Fletcher, and there's some concerns about Periwinkle Lane as well. At the current time, we park on our own property, and certainly with any further development that we do on this property, there would be parking on it as well. And again, recognizing the comments that have been made about what we may do in the future with this property, I can assure you, for what that's worth, that my husband and I do plan to live here, and we certainly don't plan to have any rentals. I do know there's been no short-term rentals. I do know there's been concerns expressed by people about the Airbnbs and such in this neighborhood, but I also am aware that the town of Gibsons has just recently made some changes to that. So hopefully some of those fears will be allayed by that. We have followed the procedures in good faith based on the fact that this property is in the official community plan. I would like to just express my thanks to Leslie Ann Statz and her staff, who have been extremely helpful in this journey for us so far. And so I did want to let the mayor and council know how helpful that they were. And again, I'm extremely appreciative of the mayor and the council for considering this rezoning application on our behalf.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
There was another hand up, but they put their hand down. If anyone wishes to speak, please raise your hand. I see no further hands raised now, Mayor Beamish.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you to everybody who participated or who attended just to listen. We appreciate your submissions, your written submissions and verbal submissions. It helps us to make this better decisions. Please note that once a public hearing regarding that bylaw is adjourned, council may not continue to receive further information or feedback from members of the public regarding that bylaw. Municipalities are legally required to ensure transparency, procedural fairness, and due process when considering public input regarding a bylaw. This legal requirement arises from common law established by court cases and includes requiring that all public feedback received be publicized as part of the open session and is made available to everyone in attendance. This to ensure transparency of everything that is considered by members of council when given the bylaw further readings. For this reason, council and staff accept public input up to and until the adjournment of the public hearing, and nothing is accepted afterwards. I will now ask the corporate officer to note and present any written submissions received during this public hearing or for the public hearing for 609 Glen Road.
I have received no further submissions for either of those zoning amendments, Mayor Beamish.
Okay, thank you. There being no further input, I adjourn this public hearing. Thank you all for your attendance and for your participation. Thank you, and thank you, council and staff.